Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire. The
World Health Organization is pushing back against President Trump's claims that he did not do enough to stop the spread of COVID-19. The WHO insisting it alerted the world about the virus at the start of January, but last night the president explained his reasoning for stopping funding of the agency.
The World Health Organization, just like the World Trade Organization, I'm telling you, I call them, they have been treating the United States for decades so badly, and they've been so in favor of China. China took off when it joined the World Trade Organization because of what's happened. Think of it. They're considered a developing nation, and because they're and we're not. Well, we're a developing nation, too, in my book, okay?
Joining me now is former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power. Her memoir is titled The Education of an Idealist. It's great to see you again, Ambassador. Thanks for being with us. The attacks on China, on the WHO, on these multilateral, these global organizations, your concern has been that this is risking a global response which could have the spread of the virus to, especially to less developed parts of the world, to Africa. Millions of people, as many as 10 million people, could die. And that would bring it back to the United States if we're just looking at our own vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I mean, there's the humanitarian catastrophe that awaits people who live in close quarters, who have no social cushion, who have no potential for a big stimulus packet and even a $1,200 check, which I know is not enough for families in this country, but still is something. That kind of backstop does not exist in much of the developing world. And as a result, many of those countries are counting on organizations like the World Health Organization for all of its flaws. And again, we do need to look back at the WHO's response quite critically. I mean, I do think they were late. I do think they were overly deferential to China. But let's be clear, the United States was late. President Trump was late. President Trump was downplaying the virus and was overly deferential to China as well. And WHO actually takes its cues in large measure still from the United States. So we can look back at the WHO, but right now, in the midst of a global pandemic with more than 2 million cases globally, just know that there are so many vulnerable communities around the world, whether refugee camps or slums, favelas, you name it, who don't have the wherewithal themselves to practice social distancing, to even have clean running water in a manner where individuals can take on themselves the kinds of behavior change that we all know are necessary. And then when the contagion begins and it really starts to strike these communities, don't have ventilators, of course, don't have gloves, masks, the kinds of things it's even taken us weeks to bring online. So the World Health Organization is a critical part of the response. And while the virus and the pandemic are raging in parts of the world, in hotspots, President Trump might like to believe that we can just build a wall around this country, but pandemics don't respect walls. And our global supply chains stretch into communities in China, in Bangladesh, in sub-Saharan Africa, our trade relationships, and of course our family ties. I mean, we're not going to be able to return to normal while this thing is raging elsewhere. So we, as you say, have a self-interest in bringing this to an end all around the world.
Even if you weren't thinking about the humanitarian tragedy that people like yourself, like Bill Gates, like Jimmy Carter are talking about, where we're not responding to all of these vulnerable populations. You also point out that we have spent $180 billion on counterterrorism since 9/11 and spending $2 billion on preparing for a pandemic. We have to build up our capacity for a recurrence of this virus and of other novel viruses.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of a larger pattern that I know you've reported on in the past many times, but just the over-militarization of our conception of national security. You know, it's no secret that even long before the pandemic, President Trump tried to cut funding to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, tried to have funding to the World Health Organization even before he was looking for a scapegoat to justify his own completely bungled response to this tragedy. So, you know, again, this conception that global public health is for do-gooders and kumbaya. Global public health is at the core of U.S. national security and has been for a really long time. And hopefully, you know, one good thing can come out of this crisis. There's no evidence yet that it has, but maybe we could finally see some bipartisan unity behind making the investments we need domestically in global health security and critically, again, because of the interconnectedness of the world at the global level.
It is Friday, the 17th of April of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, as you are well aware, and if you aren't, you will be, the French 77s are virtually mixed and poured for your virtual imbibing pleasure. If you are imbibing in the analog world, do take care. Even while sheltering in place, you might find yourselves a tad woozy if you have more than 2 French 77s. Always drink with a friend. That way you hopefully might fall into each other and hold each other up. But maybe you should just stay seated while taking a sip. All right. I don't want to imply the French 77 is dangerous, but you should still take care if you imbibe more than 2. That might be a truism for any spirit that you might imbibe in. Indeed. Well, I guess we're going to open up this economy and put a spike in coronavirus infections again. This guy is a forward thinker, isn't he? Wow. I actually think that there's something wrong with his frontal lobe. I'm not the only one. But he's not the only one clamoring for us to get our economy back. Yeah, looks like a bunch of rich people whose portfolios are dependent upon a bunch of peons working and risking their lives. Work will make you free. Arbeit macht frei. Arbeit macht frei. Okay, if there was any example of the workers' true place in this economy, this pandemic has exposed it. Apparently, we are nothing but fodder. Cogs in the machine, replaceable cogs. And the sooner we cogs wear out and they put in some new vital ones, the better. Yeah, so if this virus was developed in a lab, now I'm not saying it is. I think it's stupid to go down that route. But as a joke, if it was developed in a lab, targeting old people, useless eaters, minorities, or essentially poor people, and especially poor minorities, more useless eaters, and kids. It looks like kids are getting hit particularly hard now. And kids, by their very nature, are useless eaters until they become useful. But, you might have a surplus of useless eaters again, and you'll have to go through this whole process once more. It does seem rather targeted. And I could see where some might wrap their heads around, what if it was a biological weapon that got out of hand? I don't want to go down that route. That is a racist route. That is talking about bombing China. And I will also argue once again, I don't think it originated in China. I don't think it originated in Wuhan. Now, maybe we can find out. Maybe somebody from Wuhan brought the virus to the Australian Alps and it spread from there. But I got to say, reportage that I've been looking at, and it's not off-the-wall reportage. We're talking, about major news organizations like The Guardian, who wrote about a spike of what we now call coronavirus in the Austrian-Italian Alps in October. And maybe it was even in September, though September's a little early for skiing in the Alps. Regardless, it looks like it may have actually originated in the Alps, and that Europe had the virus before China. Now, it is possible because the Alps in general, the French, Italian, Austrian Alps, are destinations for Asian travelers coming to ski. So it is possible that maybe somebody from a lab in China was skiing in the Austrian-Italian Alps, had the virus, spread it to staff, and then they spread it elsewhere when they got done with their work. And then all the people at the resorts going home and spreading it themselves. So I'd like to see how that ferrets out, because the blaming of the Chinese seems a little too easy. Just a little too easy for this guy. And as we know, the United States has more people dying, more people infected than really the rest of the world combined. But if you listen to Trump, he's a great success. And I would argue that he's correct. He is a great success in the way that he has handled this pandemic. Because the people he wants to die are dying. And if you lose a few of your own followers, geez, rubes are rubes. They're all losers. Every crook hates the rubes. Even the ones that join him, they hate them the most. Losers. All right. We got a mobster as president. I got to say, we have a mobster as the AG also. And just mobsters throughout the whole government. And the only way to return to any semblance of normalcy when this pandemic has subsided somewhat is when Trump and every last one of his infectious viruses that he has infected the government with are purged and in jail. I don't want to say or. I want to see them and in jail. Trump himself as well. Well, a man can dream, can't he? Because it's not going to happen. We would want it to, but I just don't think it's going to happen. These people should be in jail. Fox should be in jail for spreading coronavirus lies. Trump should be in jail for spreading coronavirus lies that cause people to die. Pushing a cure in which the medicine kills people. It's for those with lupus. And we're stockpiling it because I guess Trump has an investment in it. All right. Well, we are where we are. We have November to look for. I'm hoping that we have an election. Anything can happen since this guy has absolute power. Absolute. And Article 2 gives him absolute power, which beggars the question. Why is it that no other president before Trump ever invoked an Article 2 Like that's some sort of, get out of jail free card. You can do anything you want as a Trump card. Article 2 is a Trump card. It only works for a Trump, apparently. No other president has ever invoked Article 2 to exaggerate their power. But Trump has. And where did he learn it? I'm telling you, that American civics crash course that the FSB gives doesn't really give you all the nuance of what it is to exist in American politics. It just doesn't. So he gets a little bit of it, and he pretty much finishes the story himself. And it always benefits him, always. So we can hope that November will right the ship of state. But that is only if we are able to have an election. And apparently, since this guy with his AG and the Senate Majority Leader, who looks himself to be in dire straits in terms of his own reelection, they might just say, we wanted to open up the economy, and we did, but it's still too dangerous for an election, and we can't have mail-in ballots because there's so much cheating. I mean, the Postal Service is involved, so there must be some sort of cheating. All right. We have changed quite a bit here in the United States in the last 4 years, and Trump counted on what Gore Vidal named American amnesia. That we can't remember what happened last week, let alone what happened 4 years ago. He's counting on it. But I would argue once again that there are more people who remember than don't. And he knows it. That's why he doesn't want testing. Because when the tests show that people have been dying in their homes with coronavirus and not knowing about it, those numbers of infections are going to go up. And the sheer numbers of deaths are going to go up. And Trump knows that won't fare him well in an election. He would rather have 1 million, 2 million people die and keep it hid in the hopes that the families of those 2 million people won't connect Trump's ineptness, ineffectual responses, and graft, greed, and grift was responsible for their loved one dying. He's counting on them not making that connection. And it might be true with his sycophants. Or is it sycophants? Whatever. It's true with them. But they really, truly are the toxic third, or the less of the third, toxic though they be. Extremely toxic. They believe him, and they'll run right off the precipice to prove their loyalty. All right. We don't have to. We can vote them out of office, and I hope to God we are able to convict them and throw them in jail. And Bill Barr's got to be up on the top of that list, too. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power at the top criticized Trump's decision to freeze funding to the World Health Organization, and she touted the need for a global response to the pandemic. Exactly what the World Health Organization has been saying. On the rest of the menu, the Louisiana GOP blocked an emergency election plan because it would let anybody vote. Oh, yeah, anybody registered to vote would be able to vote, and obviously the GOP cannot have that. Facebook will let you know if you shared or interacted with dangerous coronavirus misinformation on the site. I pointed out in a Facebook group here in Southern Oregon when various Trump bro MAGA brats were posting coronavirus misinformation that actually, before this announcement by Facebook that they were going to do this, Facebook actually labeled it as, well, not fake news, but misinformation, disinformation. I pointed that out to the perps involved, and they reported me to Facebook for harassing them with what Facebook did. And what did Facebook do? They suspended me. And now I've got one of those MAGA brats in my timeline being a dick. and I'm not going to respond because every time I responded to this guy, I get suspended. And he's just laughing. Goes on my timeline. Doesn't go into a group that we belong to where the problems have occurred, but on my timeline. Said, you were gone for a long time. Where did you go? Inquiring minds want to know. Well, everybody who knows me knows why I was gone. All he wants me to do is give a response that I was suspended by Facebook and he was responsible for it, and I will be suspended again for harassment. You go to this guy's timeline, is vile, sexist, racist bullshit. He never gets suspended. I post art, poetry, literature, a few political statements with a mofo here and there, but the totality of my posts, I have to say, are much more wholesome. And yet I routinely get suspended, serially, by the way, for statements made last year that are reported as harassment. Facebook, bite me. No, let's get back to what we have on the rest of the menu. And Democratic contenders for Republican-held U.S. seats outraised their opponents in the first quarter by a margin of almost 3-1. Of course, that's just the filings. We don't know how much dark money the GOP gets because apparently we don't get to know. But it's still good news, and there's been no correlation in outraising money as, you winning the election. But you know what? It helps. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Australia could keep coronavirus restrictions for a year while sending children to school in shifts. And Canada's border restrictions with the U.S. will remain in place for a significant time. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who does so much more. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page, from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is our Patreon link. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your generosity has helped us fulfill our civic duty for the last 9 years of continuous 24/7, 365 broadcasting resistance radio as the founders originally intended. And I want to thank those who have upped their monthly contribution, as well as those who are new. Thank you so much. It is heartwarming, and especially in this time when, money's a little tight, obviously. $1,200 is not enough, even though Muchin says you should be able to live for 10 weeks on $1,200. Yikes. When I lived in the Bay Area, now going on 4 years, God, it's been so long since I've been taking care of my mom. But my monthly rent in my 182 square foot studio, $925 a month. And then I had to pay electricity and my cable and my garbage and all this other stuff. What? $1,200 for 10 weeks? I don't think so, Steve. Anyway, thank you for your generosity. And thank you for increasing that generosity. I cannot tell you how much it helps. It does. If you would like to follow the station on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of that. I take care of at Justice Putnam and post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on social media, including Facebook, which I'm allowed to do so far. I expect to be reported since this Trump brat came into my timeline to stir up feces, and even if I don't respond, there's going to be something reported. I can just feel it. I can just feel it. Anyway, for now, I get to post on Facebook, and you can find links to the show there. And you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found, mixed in with all the rest of us. And there's lots of us, too, mixed in with the really good ones. Okay. I cannot go on without mentioning that Brian Dennehy passed yesterday at the age of 81. And very sad. I always liked Brian Dennehy's work. You know, he won a Tony for Death of a Salesman. Consummate actor. Much more an actor than we were ever able to see from his many television appearances in series and whatnot, and also the movies. But he was a great character actor. Some of you may know my joke, and I've been using it for quite a while now. And so it's even more poignant that Brian Dennehy has passed. Oh, my joke? Yeah, I started off looking like Jim Morrison, and I've ended up looking like Brian Dennehy. How does that happen? Well, age will do it to you. Yeah, I guess I'm considered to be a bit barrel-chested now. Burly, even. Well, rest in peace, Brian Dennehy. All righty, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oh, yes, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Dan Desai Martin of the American Independent brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Republican legislators in Louisiana rejected an emergency measure to allow more state residents to vote safely by absentee ballot during the coronavirus crisis, the Advocate reported on Wednesday. After a 3-hour hearing, the State Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee voted along party lines 5-1 against the measure, which was supported by Louisiana's Democratic governor and Republican Secretary of State. Oh, a bipartisan agreement. But the MAGA hatters in the legislature couldn't have it. No. More people voting? We can't have that. And absentee. You know, remember when absentee ballot was usually only by rich Republicans? Elderly, rich Republicans. And now they're telling us absentee ballots are rife with fraud and corruption. You mean like they always have because they were primarily only used by rich, elderly Republicans? Chicken and egg? Which is it? Well, let's be clear. Absentee ballots and mail-in ballots, every study proves no political party is benefited greater than the other political party by absentee ballots or mail-in ballots, no matter what Trump says. Let's remember that. Now, the plan would have allowed absentee voting for people with underlying health conditions, people 60 years of age or older, residents subject to stay-at-home orders, and anyone who is concerned about going out in public during the pandemic. It would also expand access to early voting and only apply to elections scheduled for July and August. Republicans oppose the measure because it would, quote, allow everyone to vote safely, end quote. That is a bad thing, apparently. It's extremely broad and basically covers everyone in Louisiana, State Senator Barry Milligan, a Republican of Shreveport, said. Milligan claimed voter fraud as a reason to oppose the measure, even though studies have shown such fraud to be extremely rare, and when they do happen, guess who does it? Trump Republicans. They figure if they're doing it, everybody is. All right. And anybody could say, hey, I'm scared to death, and then can absentee vote. Well, what's wrong with that? The is the latest Republican attempt to make it harder for people to cast ballots during the pandemic. In Wisconsin, Republicans opposed a move by Governor Tony Evers, a Democrat, to delay the state's April 7 election to permit more time for residents to cast absentee ballots by mail. Missouri's Republican Governor Mike Parson said on Tuesday that the pandemic was not a valid excuse for residents to request an absentee ballot. Missouri law allows only 6 valid excuses for residents to request an absentee ballot, and avoidance of a pandemic is not one of them. Convenient, you would say. Trump has made false claims about voter fraud as some states seek to expand access to absentee voting. Mail ballots, they cheat, okay? People cheat. Your people cheat, Trump. The rest of us are good-hearted people who follow the rules. All right? Stop putting your sins on the rest of us. Trump also revealed a political reason for his stance against mail-in voting, tweeting on April 8th that, for whatever reason, it doesn't work out well for Republicans. Yeah, because when people vote, they don't vote Republican. In order to help slow the spread of the pandemic, election officials should encourage mail-in methods of voting if allowed in the jurisdiction, and early voting where voter crowds may be smaller throughout the day, the CDC recommended. As of the Wednesday press conference, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards said that nobody should have to choose between exercising their right to vote and potentially endangering themselves or others. Louisiana's presidential primary election has been postponed twice and will now take place on the 11th of July, and the state will hold local elections on August 15th. As an aside, the Texas AG, the Texas AG said that anybody who uses the pandemic or suggests to another to use the pandemic to get an absentee ballot will be charged with a felony and thrown in jail. Barbara Ortute and Amanda Seitz of the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Facebook will soon let you know if you shared or interacted with dangerous coronavirus misinformation on the site, the latest in a string of aggressive efforts the social media giant is taking to contain an outbreak of viral falsehoods. Of course, I was suspended for pointing out in a group on Facebook here in Southern Oregon when MAGA hat Trump brats started disseminating false and fake information, and Facebook flagged it as such, and I was suspended for harassing them with that info. Curious, isn't it? The new notice will be sent to users who have clicked on, reacted to, or commented on posts. You mean like saying it's fake? And Facebook says it's fake? Interesting. Featuring harmful or false claims about COVID-19 after they have been removed by moderators. The alert, which will start appearing on Facebook in the coming weeks, will direct users to a site where the World Health Organization lists and debunks virus myths and rumors. Facebook, Google, and Twitter are introducing stricter rules, altered algorithms, and thousands of fact checks to stop the spread of bad info online about the virus. But challenges remain. Tech platforms have sent home human moderators who police the platforms, forcing them to rely on automated systems to take down harmful content. Get rid of the human. Have a robot do it. They're so unemotional, you know. Well, they are also up against people's mistrust and authoritative sources of information, such as the World Health Organization. Now, the company disclosed Thursday that it put more than 40 million warning labels in March over videos, posts, or articles about the virus that fact-checking organizations have determined are false or misleading. The number includes duplicate claims, and the labels were based on 4,000 fact checks. Facebook says those warning labels have stopped 95% of users from clicking on the false information. And Amanda Becker of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Democratic contenders for Republican-held U.S. Senate seats raised more money in early 2020 than their opponents in about a half a dozen competitive races, with campaigns amassing cash, even as a national health crisis pushed fundraising online. In 6 states where Republican senators are widely seen as vulnerable in November, Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Maine, North Carolina, and Montana, Democrats raised more money in all but Iowa during the first quarter. Mark Kelly, the Democrat seeking vulnerable Republican Martha McSally's Senate seat in Arizona, netted $11 million in the first quarter, nearly twice the sum raised by McSally. Democratic challenger Sarah Gideon raised more than twice as much as Senator Susan Collins of Maine. Outraising opponents is no guarantee Democrats will win back the Republican-controlled Senate in November elections. This year's election calendar favors Democrats, however, with 23 Republican seats up for grabs compared with 12 Democratic seats. To gain control of the Senate, Democrats need to pick up 3 seats if the party wins the White House, and 4 if not. So let's get to work. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, touching story, amusing backdrop. Pixar's first non-sequel since 2017's Coco is Onward, in which we are treated to a suburban world descended from the likes of Dungeons & Dragons. Indeed, the inhabitants, including our protagonists, are elves, but the magic is gone, as is pointed out early on, due to technology, leaving in its place inauthentic replicas of a bygone era. That's right, self-deprecation, Disney style. It's in this bizarre suburbia that we meet brothers Ian and Barley, voiced by Tom Holland and Chris Pratt. Ian is bookish and awkward, Barley boisterous and immature. The action gets going after their mom, the voice of Julia Louis-Dreyfus, pulls a magic staff out of the closet on Ian's 16th birthday. With the staff, a gemstone, and accompanying directions, the boys are supposed to be able to bring back their deceased dad, whom Ian has never met, for a 24-hour period. Ian attempts the spell, but succeeds only in bringing back Dad's lower half, thus necessitating what else but a quest in order to complete the spell and reassemble Dad. Said quest occurs mostly in Barley's van, named Guinevere, and features hilarious mythical characters. Octavia Spencer's Manticore is a notable one, plus police chases, an encounter with a motorcycle gang of sprites, all with a top-stuffed and bespectacled half-dad recalling Weekend at Bernie's. What makes Pixar films work is their ability to combine creative imagery with authentic emotion. The dynamic that plays true in this one is the love-hate sibling relationship with the issue of the lost parent. In fact, director Don Scanlon was himself a younger brother, left fatherless at a young age. Onward might not be a Pixar classic, but its quest is one that will sweep you along without a heavy hand. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
As Lyndon Johnson used to say about special interests trying to get his support to pass some blatantly self-serving legislation, they can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. Yet, chicken shit is all that the corporate health complex has to work with, as it frantically tries to defend its current system of mass malpractice known as corporate health care. After all, as most Americans have learned the hard way, the corporatized care of profiteering insurance giants, big pharma, and hospital chains grossly overcharge us while constantly trying to shortchange or outright deny care to millions of our families. So, unable to win public support on their own merit, the corporatists and their hired political hacks are going all out to continue their gouging and keep control of America's dysfunctional system. They're now running a multi-million-dollar PR and lobbying campaign of lies to trash and kill all reforms that would deliver quality, comprehensive care to everyone at far less cost than they can deliver. Masquerading as a partnership for America's healthcare future, the profiteers warn ominously that such reforms as Medicare for All or a public option for health insurance would take away people's choice and our control over healthcare. Hello, we presently have no choice or control. Our care is managed by a handful of insurance, drug, and hospital monopolists whose primary objective is not improving our health, but feathering their own cushy nests. And the undeniable ugly truth is that they can only continue ripping us off by killing real reform. This is Jim Hightower saying that's one reason the American Medical Association and others are dropping out of the partnership's political front. Honest healthcare practitioners no longer believe it's in their interest or the public's to be part of its chicken PR campaign.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was a day of tragedy for workers in the gold fields of Serbia. Gold miners by the Lena River in southeast Serbia worked under brutal conditions. The Lena Gold Mining Joint Stock Company ran the mining operation. The lucrative gold mines lined the pockets of shareholders, including Russian aristocrats and British industrialists. But the workers saw very little of the bounty they mined. They toiled for 16 hours a day for low wages. To make matters worse, workers were often paid in coupons they could cash in for food at the company store. The quality of the food was poor. A staggering 700 accidents occurred for every 1,000 workers in the mines. At the end of February, when one group of workers was given rancid meat, they had finally had enough. The workers walked out on strike. Soon they were joined by thousands of their comrades. They formed a strike committee and demanded an 8-hour day, 30% wage increase, better food, and improved workplace conditions. At first, the company agreed to talk to the workers, but negotiations went nowhere. Troops were called in and arrested the entire strike committee. Workers rallied to demand the release of their leaders. A crowd of 2,500 striking workers gathered. The troops fired into the unarmed crowd, wounding an estimated 500 workers and killing more than 250. As outraged workers across the country learned of the massacre, a wave of workers' strikes and protests swept throughout Russia. On May Day, 300,000 workers marched in the streets for the 8-hour day. The gold miners continued their strike throughout the summer, but to no avail. Thousands eventually left the gold fields to find less brutal work elsewhere.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. The labor movement's version of the Nobel Prize has been awarded to Barbara Figuera, the General Secretary of the major labor federation in Chile, the CUT. The 2020 Arthur Svensson International Prize for Trade Union Rights was awarded to Ms. Figuera in order to help strengthen workers' rights in the country. Ms. Figuera is one of the few women to head a national labor federation in Latin America. The awarding of the prize was applauded by the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC is the labor body which represents national union centers at the world level. Sharon Burrow is the ITUC's General Secretary.
Barbara Figuera, this is indeed an honour to congratulate you for being the 2020 winner of the Arthur Svensson International Prize for Social Justice. I can't think of a more deserving candidate. You have been a leader, you are a leader, you'll always be a leader. Indeed, the first time I met Barbara was on the streets during the general strike in Chile some years ago when she was a leader of the student movement. She and her other colleagues, along with trade union leaders, faced rubber bullets and tear gas in defence of then access to affordable, free public education. We know that she was the youngest trade union leader elected in Latin America to be the General Secretary of the CUT Chile, and indeed she's a proud member of the executive of both CHUCA, our Latin American Federation, or our Federation for the Americas, and indeed, of course, for the ITUC. We're proud of you, Barbara. I know your union members are proud of you, but we also recognise that having led your union through labour reforms, you were also recognised as indeed a leader amongst those civil society and other leaders in the massive protests last year for access to free public services that actually saw the climate conference shifted to Madrid. We know your incredible courage, your commitment to justice. We'll also see the fight for the end of the Pinochet Constitution come to fruition. I salute you for your courage, for your leadership. Congratulations.
The ITUC has been surveying government responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. The results of the survey has prompted the Confederation to revise its original set of demands for government action.
The initial demands for government response were in fact paid sick leave, wage guarantees, income support that goes beyond those workers directly employed to those in non-standard forms of work, platform business, freelancers, informal workers, many others in our economies who are not covered and have fallen through the cracks of a regulated labour market. And then, of course, support for rent, mortgages, loans, so people are not turfed out on the streets because they've lost income and can't pay. Freely accessible, non-discriminatory healthcare. It's critical. We are not seeing that universally. That must change. We also need an urgent drive now for social protection, a global social protection fund. I can't stress enough the devastation that would be writ large if people don't have income and they don't, in fact, have food and water in some countries. A global social protection fund is at the heart of our demands now, and we need social dialogue to deliver both the original demands and the global funds to support those who are in countries without the capacity to do so. The humanitarian cost is, of course, our first priority, but unless we get this right, then we won't even be sustaining basic economies, let alone being in a position to rebuild.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Marc Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about caring for each other through global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 39 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not supposed to be that cold. We are expecting a high bumping 80 today, plentiful sunshine. Winds will be light and variable, which is good because the winds have been wreaking havoc on all my umbrellas. Tonight we should be clear to partly cloudy with a low in the mid-40s. Winds will pick up out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy conditions tomorrow. Highs only around 70 to 72. With winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County here in Southern Oregon remain steady at 47 cases and with none deceased. Josephine County, the county that I'm on the county line at, has 3 confirmed deaths. All right. Well, that's not good. Let's see. Grass pollen is moderate locally. The air quality index in the region is good at 28 parts per million. And the daytime UV index remains high, though it has clicked down 1 notch to 6. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.96 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles. And relative humidity is down to 40%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 56 and partly cloudy, and they waited too long to attend to the pandemic coronavirus. Paris is 74 and sunny, and they are imposing even more stricter measures to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Rome is 70 degrees and sunny with a resurgence of people who have recovered from coronavirus who are now sick again. Kyiv is 57 and fair, and they are enacting stricter measures because of coronavirus. Kabul is 49 and mostly cloudy, and we don't really know about the severity of coronavirus because of the Taliban. Hong Kong is 70 and partly cloudy, and they don't care about social distancing anymore. They're just not going to have it, which means they'll probably have a spike in coronavirus infections. Tokyo is 58 degrees with a rain shower and strict measures being imposed because of coronavirus. Sydney, Australia is 61 and clear, and we have a big story about what they're going to do because of coronavirus coming up at the chef's table here. San Francisco, California is 51 and cloudy with still shelter-in-place state order because of coronavirus. And New York is 44 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, with people still dying in the thousands because of coronavirus. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Brian Kay and Colin Packham of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Australians were strongly urged to sign up for a controversial mobile phone app that will track their movements, as officials warned today that public life could be constrained for another year because of the coronavirus pandemic. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said downloading the smartphone software, which has been criticized by civil liberties groups as an invasion of privacy, would initially be voluntary. However, he declined to rule out making use of the Trace Together app compulsory, stressing the ability to detect potential new outbreaks would be a key part of giving officials the confidence to begin winding back strict social distancing measures. I will be calling on Australians to do it, frankly, as a matter of national service, Morrison told radio station Triple M. This would be something that might not normally do in an ordinary time, but this is not an ordinary time. If you download this app, you will be helping to save someone's life. The government is planning to roll out the app within the next 2 weeks after finishing legal issues around privacy. Australia has so far avoided the high numbers of coronavirus casualties reported around the world after closing its borders and imposing strict restrictions on public movement.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
David Lundgren, also of Reuters, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Canada's border restrictions with the United States will remain in place for, quote, a significant amount of time, end quote, as the two countries fight the coronavirus outbreak, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said. Washington and Ottawa agreed last month to clamp down on non-essential travel while allowing trade to continue across their long shared frontier. Where's my poutine? I haven't been getting my poutine. As we move forward, there will be special thought given to this relationship, but at the same time, we know that there are a significant amount of time still before we can talk about loosening such restrictions, Trudeau told a daily briefing. Donald Trump told reporters the two countries were doing well and added, it will be one of the early borders to be released. The two economies are highly integrated, and allowing trade to continue avoided major problems for the auto sector, as well as transportation of food and medicine. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But do stay tuned to Netroots Radio for all the breaking news. In fact, we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.